Hey, what's going on, Raiders? I'm the OneTrueSpry, and this is Back to the Basics Raid Shadow Legends Bootcamp Starter Edition. Alright, guys. Before we begin with who to choose as your starter champion, I'm going to go ahead and cover three things. One, to be as fair as possible, all the champions will be wearing the exact same equipment. Two, Elhain is level 60. She's the only one who's 6 stars, so she's going to have a little bit of a damage increase compared to the other champions. However, don't take it too much to heart. Elhain's not really the strongest. However, she is the easiest to build. 3, and if you've already chosen your champion, then you can go ahead and look down below, and there should be timestamps available for you to go to your champion. So if you have chosen, or if you're thinking about choosing Elhain as your starter champion, there are some things you should need to know about her. Elhain, in the end, if you actually take her to 6 stars, she will have the highest base HP, as well as for her attack. Out of all the starters, she has the highest attack and the highest speed. And having the highest speed is a very big advantage for early game when you don't quite have as many good artifacts to get that speed up higher on your champions. But she also comes in with the lowest defense. So now I'm going to be going over her damage multipliers. And if you want to look at these yourself, I pulled these from Ash Voyager's RSL damage multipliers. It's a Google spreadsheet. If you type it in on Google, you'll find it. There's also going to be a link below in the description. So for Elhain, her A1 is a 2.2 multiplied by her attack on a maximum of 2 hits. Her A2 is a 4 multiplied by her attack to the target, followed by a 2.2 multiplied by her attack area of effect damage. For her A3 is a 2.2 multiplied by her attack on 2 hits area of effect. Going over her campaign clear. So Elhain at about 5 stars is going to be about 1:30 for a clear of 12-3 brutal. But if you take her to 6 stars and you have a moderate amount of good gear on her, you can expect between about 40 seconds and a minute. So now that we've just went through campaign with Elhain, I'm going to go ahead and hop into dungeon content. But while I'm doing that, I'm also going to go over her pros and cons so you guys can weigh her as a champion and see if you want to choose her or not as your starter. One, she is the easiest to build out of all the starter champions due to the fact that she does not need accuracy in her kit because she does not apply any debuffs to enemies. 2, due to her not needing accuracy, instead of running the support tree, you can actually run the defensive tree, going down in your masteries and unlocking counterattack abilities. 3, she has 2 very good damage area of effect abilities, which are going to help you tremendously for early mid-game in campaign and early to mid-game in dungeons. 4, the High Elves faction. High Elves Faction Wars is the easiest faction that you can actually get into for early game due to the fact of how many other great champions are in that faction. Some of those other champions you can use would be Elfguard, Apothecary, Reliquary Tender, but with every good thing, there's also some negative things. So now we're going to go over her cons. 1, Elhain being straight just damage, it's not hard to replace her. So you could get an epic within your first couple weeks of the game and you instantly have no more use for her. It's both a good and a bad thing, but do with that as you will. Don't put too much time and energy into her if you feel like, or if you already have, replaced her. 2, her viability late game falls off hard. A lot of your champions that you're going to be having on your team are going to have weaken abilities, defense down abilities, or they're going to have buffs, which help your team be stronger. So with her, there's nothing really offered. Nothing in her kit stands out to make her different from anybody else. 3, though she has the highest stats out of all the starters on average, her defense is the lowest. And with that being said, she's a glass cannon. If you can't keep her alive, or if you don't have good enough support to revive her after she dies, then what's the point of having her on your team? So you either have chosen or you're thinking about choosing the early game Fire Knight Queen, Athel herself. Athel is coming in as a great champion for the Sacred Order. When it comes to her stats, she has the lowest attack. However, she makes up for it because she has the highest defense out of all 4 starter champions. With her speed, she's coming in as the second fastest with a speed of 1 of 4. So now we're going to gear Athel using the exact same equipment that we just used with Elhain. Now again, these artifacts aren't meant to be super late game artifacts. These are meant to be account viable, something that you guys can achieve pretty easily and probably within about the first month and a half. Let's go over her damage multipliers. So for Athel, her A1 is a 1.3 multiplied by her attack for 3 hits. For her A2, it's going to be a 4.1 multiplied by her attack as an AoE damage. For her A3, which is what actually makes Athel very unique, she has the ability to apply a self buff on herself. So she can place a 25% increased attack buff on herself for 2 turns. And she can apply a 30% increased defense buff on herself if you activate the skill while she's under 50% of her health. Alright, coming in at a minute 34, not the fastest that we've seen so far, but I guess it's viable. So let's go over Athel's pros and cons. The largest reasons most people pick Athel as their starter is simply because she is a very good early Fire Knight champion. With her A1 having the ability to hit 3 times and her ability to place weaken is actually extremely helpful, both for Fire Knight and kind of for early game clan boss. For the second pro, she's the most durable starter that you can choose. Just because she has the highest defense, it's going to help her stay alive longer because she can take more hits. Number 3, she offers the strong version of a weaken on her A1 at 100% land rate, which is extremely helpful for any dungeon content, simply because once she lands that debuff on the boss, they're going to be taking more damage. And not a lot of rares actually have the ability to do that. I think there's about 4. Some of the negatives about her though, because with every good, there always comes bad. Both of her self buffs are the weak versions. So once you start to get better champions, she's gonna be replaced with her buffs. 2, it's really hard to get good Sacred Order faction war champs early game. It's not gonna help you get very far until you get into the late game and actually unlocking a lot of the epics or legendaries. Number 3, taking an extra turn can actually really mess up your team buffs. So if you have that increased defense by 60% and she takes that extra turn and she just has the defense fall off of her, she's going to get targeted and she's going to get killed a lot faster. So now it's up to the one true poisoner Kael. Either you've seen all the hype on him, or you just thought he looked really cool and he had the best abilities. Now we're going to be going over his stats. So Kael and Galek both actually have the exact same stats. They're going to be coming in 1 speed lower than Athel. However, they're going to have a little bit more HP by about 200 and a little bit more attack than Athel, but they're still going to be weaker than Elhain. So now we're going to be re-gearing Kael with all the artifacts that we just used on Athel. For Kael's damage multipliers, his A1 is a 3.5 multiplied by his attack plus 100, and having the ability to land a small poison buff. His A2 is going to be 4.65 multiplied by his attack on an AoE damage, with the ability to fill his turn meter by 25% for each enemy he kills. So if you're able to get him up to 1 hit territory for 12-3, he will be the fastest starter when it comes to clearing the campaign. His A3, it's going to be a lot weaker than most of the other champions. However, it's going to be 1.5 multiplied by his attack with the 4 hits. Due to the fact that it's random and you can't control where those hits go, or that it's purely an AoE, it's going to be a lot harder for you to count on where those damages are actually going to land. And for those of you who don't know, poison debuffs, essentially what it's going to be, it's going to be a tick damage that's going to happen at the start of the enemy's turn, being equivalent to how many poison buffs they have on them, whether that be 2.5% of their health or 5% of their health. Kael is a very strong rare from the Dark Elves faction. Out of all of the starters, he's actually going to be one of the only starters that you can use all the way from early game to the very end of the game. Due to the fact that he places poisons on both of his A1 and his A3 abilities, his damage potential never truly falls off. But with him being a rare, he's going to have lower stats than most of your epic or legendary champions. So sooner or later, you are going to replace him. Now let's go over Kael's pros and cons. So for his pros, with Kael being a great poisoner, his damage potential is, like I said earlier, it doesn't really go away. Simply because you can always use him to do that percent damage to the bosses or clan boss. 2, he's going to be very helpful early game for Spider due to his A2 ability, and for Dragon due to having that poison. It's going to take the dragon's shield away when he goes back to do his special move. 3, it's going to be kind of hard to replace Kael, simply because there's not a lot of good early game poisoners. There's a couple uncommons that you can use, but they don't offer as much skill as Kael. 4, as you're going to see in the arena, early game, Kael is going to be great at nuking most of your teams. Most people are going to run Kael with him following right behind War Maiden, because she's going to decrease your defense, and then Kael's just going to come in and absolutely kill your entire team. Now we're going to be going into the cons of Kael. So 1, he's kind of a one-trick pony with poisons. His flat damage is not very high. However, with him being able to land poisons, yes, he'll be able to put out more damage if you're facing somebody with a lot of health. Number 2, Dark Elves is one of the harder faction wars. Just because early game, with only having Kael, yes, you're going to be able to clear some, but he's not tanky enough for you to survive, and it's not likely that you're going to be able to get a Painkeeper or a Cold Heart or a Loria anytime in the beginning. So it's just going to be a little hard for you to climb up the ranks in the faction wars with him. Alright guys, so you chose Galek as your starter. So I don't know if that's because you have a relationship drama just like he does, or maybe you're just a fan of WoW and you just really appreciate orcs. Anyways, his stats, he's going to be the exact same stats as Kael, so he's going to be built very similar. So now we're going to be equipping Galek with the exact same artifacts that we've used on Elhain, Athel, and Kael. Now let's go over his damage multipliers. So for his A1, his 2-hit ability, it's going to be a 1.5 multiplied by his attack. For his A2, it's going to be a 4.5 multiplied by his attack as an AoE damage. For his A3, it's going to be a 1.6 multiplied by his attack. However, again, due to it being 4 times at random, you're not going to be able to tell where that's going to land. So going over Galek's pros and cons. So his pros. What makes Galek good? His increased speed buff on himself is actually going to help you when it comes to dungeon content and arena battles. Yes, you can get an increased speed buff if you farm up to stage 12 and you're actually pulling Diabolist, or if you've been in the game for the first 30 days and you've already started getting like your high Katoon, or you've already got lucky pulling Apothecary. 2. With his 2 hits on his A1 and his 4 hits on his A3, it's actually going to be really strong against the Fire Knight. So it's just going to help you take that Fire Knight's shield down, so you can actually either reduce his turn meter or you can just straight put more damage onto the Fire Knight to kill him. And number 3, after you unlock Shaman, if you're able to put a little bit of time into her, between Galek and Shaman, they should both be able to get you up to about stage 10 in Faction Wars. Cons. So now we're going to go over what makes him bad. So not being able to control his defense down. If you chose to use him like in arena or in dungeons, you're still going to have to run like a War Maiden or another champion that has decreased defense debuff. For number 2, he's going to be a decent damage dealer. I can't say great, I can't say terrible, but it's not amazing, but it's not going to like tickle. Number 3, nothing really sets him aside from others in his kit. Kind of like I said earlier, you can, after a little while, you're going to get that Diabolist or you're going to get that Apothecary or the High Katoon, and they're just going to help you increase your speed, kind of like not making his A2 viable. And then with his A3, since you're not able to control it, it's not really that useful. It's just going to be worth way more if you just go through and you pull like a War Maiden and you just put your time and investment into her. Hello guys, that was Back to the Basics Raid Shadow Legends Bootcamp Starter Edition. Tell me, what starter did you guys choose to go with? Why? Also, stay tuned over the next few days. I plan on recording and releasing a new video for all the campaign farmers, going over who you can use early, mid, and late game, and then the 2 different type of common builds for campaign farmers. This was the OneTrueSpry. I'm out of here.